Good afternoon, I'm Joe Dorfman and I'm here this afternoon with Ian Johnstone, who is the curator of the Troon Lifeboat Station. Ian, when exactly did the lifeboat station become active, and was there anything specific that prompted to put a lifeboat station here?
Yes, at that time in the 1870s, 1871 was the date the first lifeboat came to Troon. At that time there were other lifeboats at Irvine, Ardrossan and Ayr, and the development of Troon Harbour meant that the port was very, very busy, and it became clear to the locals that a lifeboat may be required here because of sometimes of difficulty getting the vessels into Troon Harbour on a bad day. And there was a number of occasions where vessels finished up on the shore or on the rocks, and lifeboat had to come from Irvine and to do the job of the rescue. So a committee was set up in Troon, and a new lifeboat was built down in London and was transported free of charge by the railway company up to Troon. And that arrived on the 26th of January 1871. And she was a self-righting lifeboat, pulling lifeboat. She had 10 oars to propel the boat. And on the 28th of January, she was taken from the old railway station, or the railway station as it was then, up at in the Mar College vicinity, and pulled by all willing volunteers to pull the boat and its carriage from there down to where the marina is now, and launch the boat into the water. It was a big procession that would involve many of the local organisations, the shipyard workers. It was led by the Irvine Brass Band, so it was quite a show. And some of the men who actually physically pulled the boat down were made up with Italian sailors whose vessels were in Troon Harbour at that time, and they volunteered to go and get on the ropes and give it a pull. So there was a ceremony down at, as I said, where the marina is now, and the boat was launched into the water and then rowed round out the harbour round to the front shore, where she was recovered on a carriage, and that was basically the start of the lifeboat service in Troon. So last year we celebrated the 150th anniversary of, but due to COVID obviously that had been delayed, but last year we managed to get it done, so it was very good. Initially the boat was kept in the lifeboat house in Portland Street, where the vet surgery is and the old police station. It was in that area, and the boat had to be pulled either by manual means or horses on its carriage actually down to the North Shore, or occasionally down to the front shore, or even down to the harbour area and launched into the water here. As I say, the volunteers, a crew actually of 13, 10 on the oars, a bowman, a coxswain and a second coxswain were required to man it. And that remained the case, and then they discovered that during the winter time they would prefer the boat to be stationed afloat, and again moorings were laid in what is the marina area now, and the lifeboat was kept there, and it only went back into the boathouse in June, July and August in the summer. The rest of the time it was kept afloat. And then we had the first boat was called the Mary Sinclair. She was named Mary Sinclair after the donor's daughter. That was a Mrs. Sinclair from Greenock, who provided the funding for the Mary Sinclair. After that boat had spent its time here, we had another pulling and sailing boat, the Alexander Monarch, which was more or less the same type of vessel. And then following it, we had the Charles Skirrell, which was a slightly larger boat, and it had originally been in service at Rossin, and then came down here. And then in 1904, we received a Watson class 38-foot pulling and sailing lifeboat, and she was kept again afloat in the harbour all the time, because by that time the old lifeboat house had been taken over by something else. And that time they actually used to be a tenement building over on the left-hand side of the harbour, and there was a storeroom there for the lifeboat. And then they eventually had an oilskin store on the shipbreakers pier, and a small boarding boat to get on board. So the Busby was on station from 1904 to 1929, and that's when the first motor lifeboat came to Troon.
So can you tell, the first one was a rowing boat,
Yeah.
and it's evolved into these kind of masterpieces of technology now. Can you maybe just talk us briefly through the evolution of that from rowing boat to the modern boat?
Yeah, obviously, back in the day when they were developing engines, they obviously decided to try a petrol engine in a lifeboat. Prior to that, we had steam lifeboats. Not very many, but 4 or 5 of them, and they were propelled by, some were propelled by jets. You know, the steam engine on the boat actually sucked the water up and pushed it through a jet unit.
Right.
And we're talking about the 1890s time. So I mean, it was something else then. So that they were propelled that way, and some had jet units, some had propellers as normal. But they had various trials with different types of petrol engine, and then eventually the reliability of these engines were such that they could be put into the lifeboats, and that then was the start of motor lifeboats. The motor lifeboat that came to Troon in 1929, Sir David Richmond of Glasgow, she was a single screw, and she had a 4-cylinder petrol engine in her, and as well as that, she had mast and sails as auxiliaries if required.
So belt and braces.
Belt and braces, yeah. It was very successful. They had quite what we'd call a Story passage home. That was in November time. She left the Isle of Wight where she was built, and the passage home was in quite horrendous weather. So all the way, she had various stops on the way back from the Isle of Wight to Troon, but when I say it was a motor lifeboat, they had virtually no shelter. There was a cuddy, if you like, over the engine controls, so the engineer could sit in there, because at that time, and right up until the late 50s, early 60s, the engines on lifeboats were mechanic controlled, so the coxswain had to call down to them what engine movement he wanted. So there was very little shelter on her, so the crew that came up would be the old oilskins and what have you, to say they were rather wet would be putting it mildly. So Sir David Richmond, she was on station till 1955, when the twin diesel engine lifeboat arrived on station. But during that time, Sir David had quite a number of calls and some notable rescues. One in particular where the coxswain and mechanic received the coxswain received a silver medal for gallantry and mechanic a bronze for the rescue of 7 men or 7 crew of the vessel My Allen, which was in trouble down off the Nure. And they got a call. That was in 1940 that this happened. They got a call to say that it was in need of assistance, and that was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And they went down, and various things happened. But the finish up, the coxswain had to drive the lifeboat bow into the vessel to get the people off it, and the mechanic was up to his neck really in water, trying to control the engines at the same time because of the weather conditions at the time. But they rescued the crewmen and arrived back in Troon about 10:15 that night. So it was a long job. Another one was Christina Dawn, where the coxswain, it was a cargo vessel that was running into Irvine, and she went aground, missed the entrance, and was requiring assistance. And the lifeboat launched then, and the coxswain went alongside and took the people off, and it came back off. But he knew while he was doing that that the cargo was carbide, and when it mixed with seawater, there was a danger of explosion. And in actual fact, a couple of days after the rescue, the ship did blow up. So that was, and he got thanks of the institution in Vellum for that one, and most of the awards on the board.
Okay.
All there.
One class of boat that we omitted to say about is the Arran class lifeboat. She arrived on station in 1987 and was funded by the City of Glasgow Lifeboat Appeal. So a lot of firms, etc., and individuals put a lot of money into funding the lifeboat. And she was a different class of boat again. She was much bigger than what we'd had before, and again the advancement with all the technology in these boats was good. She also carried a daughter boat which we used in numbers of occasions to effect a rescue, and she had good cabin space for survivors. She was a very good boat, a great search platform because she had a flying bridge, and she was also self-righting as well. She came back up from being deliberately capsized in 7 seconds. So it was she a very good, stable lifeboat that again did a lot of good work on the station.
Ian, what was so special about the twin-screw Waveney class boat?
Yeah, the Waveney was the boat that came after we had the twin-screw diesel Watson class lifeboat. The Waveney was a complete step change as far as lifeboating was concerned. She was actually based on a United States Coast Guard cutter that had the United States Coast Guard were developing for use as a lifeboat in America. And the institution managed to have one sent across for trials. This was the start of self-righting motor lifeboats. She was a completely different shape to a conventional lifeboat as we knew it, and she had 2 forward cabins, an after cabin, and an open wheelhouse, and she was faster than the normal conventional lifeboat. They could do 8 knots. The Waveney, you could get 14 out, so she was considerably faster. So that in itself meant that the equipment on board was more sophisticated, if you like, than what had been on the Watson cabin boat. For a start, it had radar. Prior to that, there was no radar on the lifeboats. She had radar, echo sounders, MF radios, VHF radios, and plenty of space for survivors that you picked up. And she was an ideal all-round lifeboat. She could tow, the towing post was in the right place. She could firefight. She had engine-driven pumps for firefighting. And self-righting again, from being upside down to upright again, 8 to 10 seconds. And that was a great thing. She was 44 foot long and 12 feet in the beam, and she was she was a good all-round boat. Took a wee bit of getting used to for the crews that were used to the conventional lifeboat. She was quite lively in a sea. They say she could roll in damp grass, but we had 2 here prior to the arrival of the Arnold class, and they both performed extremely well and did a lot of good jobs.
We've talked a bit about the boats and the technology there. What about the actual equipment the crew would use? How has that evolved from the oilskin and the sou'wester to?
Yes, it's progressed leaps and bounds, even from the type of equipment I used when I first started on lifeboats. And I brought along some examples of what we have.
So I'd like to let you have a look at the development of oilskins and life jackets that have gone on through the years. The oldest type of life jacket we have on the station is the old K-pop type life jacket. You put that on like a waistcoat and strapped it up. That obviously went on over the top of the old oilskin jacket. There was nothing in the oilskin jacket or coat to keep you warm, so you had to put old jumpers and jackets that you had and put the oilskin coat on. Then the life jacket went on, and on your feet you wore thigh boots or waders. And then on the top, it was the old sou'wester cap. From that, we went on to this type of life jacket, which had inherent buoyancy in it, that if you did go into the water, it would turn you over on your back with your head up. And it had the buoyancy around the back of your head, so for support. If you needed extra air, you could blow down the tube and inflate it. And it also had a safety light that was operated by a saltwater battery in the base of the jacket. And it also afforded you some protection. We wore these on the Waveney type lifeboats, and if you're in a seaway and you're getting thrown about a bit, this gave you a bit of protection if you were getting pumped. The oilskin changed to an orange jacket and bib and brace trousers. It had some warmth inside. Again, though, you had to put other layers on. And on top, instead of a sou'wester, you had a bump cap on top now. From that, we went on to this type of life jacket. 2 compartments. It was flat pack, basically. And then if you finished up in the water, there was a valve in one side that was automatic. It was a firing pin with a piece of paper cartridge, and when obviously you went into the water, the cartridge melted or dissolved, and the firing pin fired into a gas bottle, and the jacket inflated. On the other side, you had a manual bottle. You just pulled the pin, and then you would have both stoles, as they call them, inflated, and that was there to self-right you as well, because it just inflated around the back of your head. Instead of a bump cap, you now wear helmets, safety helmets, and the oilskins went on to this type of jacket. That's up until the advent just last year. The oilskins and life jackets have progressed again. Basically the same, except the new system is all in a layered system. So you have body warmers and various other pieces of equipment that you can put on before the jacket itself goes on top. So, and again, the helmets, and I've just been told today that the helmets themselves are changing again. They're bringing out a new type of helmet. So things progress all the time, along with the equipment. On the boats now, the electronic equipment, like radar, chart plotters, they all are interfaced, so they all talk to each other. So the navigator and the radar operator have the same sort of screen. Communications have vastly improved. So there's all sorts of things going on that has been great over these last couple of decades to see the improvements that are going on in the boat, and all this equipment, etc., and things to keep the crew safe. It's all pennies in the box that pays for it. And it was the same old adage when I first started. The coxswain said to me, make sure you get a pair of boots that are a size too big, because being waders, if you went into the water, they would fill with water, and if you couldn't get them off your feet,
yeah, it could pull you down. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it was all good fun.
Yeah. I mean, as the complexity of the equipment improved,
oh yeah,
obviously the cost would improve. So, I mean, roughly, what does it cost to equip a crewman nowadays?
We're talking about probably £1,500 to £2,000 for the amount for the type of equipment we've got on. It's substantially better than what we had initially. It's a layered system now that they wear, so that there's thermal clothing as part of the kit. The life jackets that we wear now have automatic valves in them that if the crew member hits the water, the jacket can automatically inflate. They also have man overboard transponders on so that if somebody goes into the water, it sets off a ping so that their position is identified. Instead of sou'westers now, they wear helmets. So it's changed completely round, but it's had to, like the evolution of the boats, the equipment has had to change as well, because you've got to have that type of equipment, lightweight as well as warm, and protection when the crew are out,
because obviously they can get very fatigued if they're cold. And it's something that you've always got to guard against as a crew member.
We've covered the boats and the equipment and how these have evolved, but I take it the type of person you're looking to recruit as a crewman, that hasn't evolved because it's the same type or quality of. What are those qualities that you look for in a crewman?
Look at a willingness to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, they don't have to have any experience per se of being at sea, and in fact, the biggest percentage of volunteers these days do not have any seagoing experience. But that's no bad thing, because you can then train the person to the standard that you require. Mm-hmm. And then the rest comes with experience and being on the boat. Each crew member now has a specific crew plan. They have to go through various things. They have to do sea survival. They've got to know about where everything's stored on the boat. So there's all sorts of different areas that they have to have a crew training plan, if you like. Mm-hmm. And then they cover the basics initially, and then once that's they manage to do that, then they can then go on and do other things like learning about the engines, navigation, that sort of thing.
Now, I use the term crewman. Am I likely to get my knuckles rapped for that?
You are, yes. Nowadays, it's open to ladies, and in fact, the station has 2. Other stations have more, and there's absolutely nothing to stop female joining the lifeboat crew these days.
And finally, Ian, if people want to find out more about the history of the station and the area around here, what's the best way to go about it?
Well, the station has its own Facebook page, so anybody that's interested can have a look at that and see what's going on at the station. It's kept updated regularly, mm-hmm. and includes any times that the boat's been out and what type of service it's been and what the result of the service has been. And if they want more and more in depth, they can arrange a visit down to the station, mm-hmm. and they contact me, and I can give them a tour of what we have here and explain maybe in a wee bit more depth of what we have.
Do you have many visits from schools?
Yes, the President Coxswain, and also the safety officer, they go out and give talks to schools, and also schools come down here and visit and get a chance to have actual close look at the present lifeboat here, or the present 2 lifeboats, because we've got an offshore lifeboat and an inshore boat. Uh-huh. So yes, that's ongoing, and Coxswain and, as I said, others go out and give talks to church organisations, ladies' guilds, anybody that wants a chat about what the RNLI is about, what it does, and what it does here. There's always something to do.
Now, I understand it's purely voluntary and it's run by donations from the public.
Yes.
Do you get any government funding? Or
get no government funding at all. It's all pennies in the box and legacies and wills and things like that. They keep the institution going. In some ways, you might say that's a good thing, that we have an independence, that we can do what we want to do within limits. Mm-hmm. The only thing that the government would is that the crews are suitably qualified, sure, and have the relevant training. All the coxswains nowadays have to be yacht masters qualification, and that's all. Most of all of the training these days is in-house.
Fine. Good. Ian, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're more than welcome.